Millionaire didn't know he had children until he saw his ex-wife feeding 3 kids identical to him. Before the story begins, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Enjoy. The autumn wind whispered through the skyscraper canyons of Manhattan, carrying the scent of approaching rain as Maxwell Sterling strode purposefully down Fifth Avenue. At 42, Maxwell had conquered the business world with the same precision and determination that defined every aspect of his meticulously ordered life. His dark tailored suit and polished Italian leather shoes marked him as a man of wealth, but the perpetual furrow between his brows suggested someone who rarely found satisfaction in his achievements. "Mr. Sterling, the Tokyo investors are waiting for your call." His assistant's voice came through his earpiece. "Push it back 30 minutes, Maxwell replied, surprising even himself with the decision. Something had drawn him to walk today, a restlessness he couldn't explain. As rain began to fall, Maxwell ducked into a small cafe, the kind of ordinary establishment he normally wouldn't notice. That's when he saw her. Seated in a corner booth was Eliza, his college sweetheart and ex-wife from a short-lived marriage 15 years ago, the woman who had walked away claiming she couldn't compete with his ambition. But what froze Maxwell in his tracks wasn't Eliza, it was the 3 boys seated with her. About 7 years old, with identical faces, dark hair, and unmistakable sterling gray eyes. His eyes, 3 perfect reflections of himself as a child. "More hot chocolate, boys?" Eliza asked, her voice carrying across the cafe. "Noah, stop teasing your brothers." Maxwell felt the world tilt beneath his feet. Brothers, identical triplets, his sons, 3 children he never knew existed. When Eliza looked up and met his gaze, her face drained of color. For a suspended moment, they stared at each other across 15 years of silence and secrets. One of the boys followed his mother's gaze, his curious eyes finding Maxwell's. The resemblance was so striking it physically hurt. Maxwell took 1 step forward, then another, pulled by an invisible force toward this family, his family, that had existed without him. The carefully constructed walls of his empire suddenly felt meaningless compared to this discovery. "Maxwell," Eliza whispered as he reached their table. "Dad?" one of the boys asked innocently, looking between his mother and this strange man with his own eyes. In that single word, Maxwell Sterling's perfectly ordered world shattered completely. Maxwell canceled all meetings that afternoon, something unprecedented in his career. Now he sat across from Eliza in a quiet corner of a nearby restaurant, the triplets excitedly exploring a play area visible through glass walls. "Why?" The question came out harsher than he intended, his voice rough with suppressed emotion. Eliza's fingers twisted nervously around her coffee cup. "You were building your empire, Maxwell. You made it clear nothing would stand in your way. They're my sons, Eliza. 7 years of their lives, gone." His hand clenched into a fist on the table. "I found out I was pregnant 2 weeks after signing our divorce papers," she explained. "You were in Tokyo closing your first major deal. When I called, your assistant said you couldn't be disturbed for anything less than a global financial collapse." Maxwell remembered that deal, the cornerstone of Sterling Enterprises. He'd ignored everything else for weeks. "I tried again," Eliza continued. "But by then your face was in Forbes. You were dating that supermodel. Your life was moving exactly as you'd planned." She looked toward the boys. "I decided they deserved a father who wanted them more than success." "You had no right to make that choice for me," Maxwell said, struggling to control his voice. "Maybe not," Eliza admitted. "But I made it for them." Maxwell watched his sons, identical in appearance but already showing distinct personalities. One organized blocks methodically, another built an elaborate tower, while the third pretended his blocks were cars. "Noah, Lucas, and Ethan," Eliza said, following his gaze. "Noah's our artist. Lucas builds things, and Ethan never stops moving." "I want a DNA test," Maxwell said automatically, then immediately regretted the businessman's response when hurt flashed across Eliza's face. "Of course you do," she replied coolly. "They're at the age where they're asking about their father. I told them he was someone special who didn't know about them yet." Maxwell felt something crack inside his carefully constructed armor. I want to know them, he said simply. Eliza nodded. They should know you too. As if sensing they were being discussed, the triplets looked up simultaneously, their identical gray eyes, his eyes regarding him with innocent curiosity. When can I see them again? Maxwell asked, unable to look away from these three mirrors of himself. They have a baseball game Saturday morning. I'll be there, Maxwell promised, already rescheduling the Tokyo meeting in his mind. For the first time in 15 years of relentless ambition, Maxwell Sterling had found something more important than business. The Saturday morning sunshine cast long shadows across the Little League field as Maxwell arrived, feeling strangely out of place. In his casual attire, designer jeans and a button-down shirt that cost more than most parents' entire wardrobes, he spotted Eliza in the bleachers, surrounded by other cheering parents. You came, she said, surprise evident in her voice when he sat beside her. I said I would. Maxwell's eyes were fixed on the field where the triplets stood in their matching uniforms, distinguishable only by the numbers on their backs, 7, 8, and 9. Noah's in right field, Lucas is pitcher, and Ethan's at shortstop, Eliza explained, pointing to each boy. They've been excited all morning knowing you'd be here. Maxwell felt a strange tightness in his chest. The DNA results came back yesterday. And? Eliza asked, though they both knew the answer. 0.9% match, he replied. They're mine. When Lucas struck out a batter, Maxwell found himself cheering instinctively. The boy turned, searching the stands until he found Maxwell. The smile that spread across his face made something shift inside Maxwell's carefully guarded heart. After the game, a narrow victory celebrated with ice cream, Maxwell awkwardly knelt to the boy's level in the parking lot. So, you're our dad? Noah asked, studying Maxwell's face with an artist's eye for detail. Yes, Maxwell answered simply. Where have you been? Lucas questioned, always the practical one. I didn't know about you, Maxwell said truthfully. If I had, I would have been here. Ethan, the most physical of the three, suddenly threw his arms around Maxwell's neck. Do you have a swimming pool? Mom says rich people have pools. Ethan, Eliza admonished, but Maxwell found himself laughing, a genuine laugh he hadn't experienced in years. I do have a pool, he confirmed. Perhaps you could visit sometime. Tomorrow? All three boys asked in unison. Maxwell looked to Eliza, who nodded reluctantly. Tomorrow, he agreed. As they parted ways, Maxwell felt the weight of his phone vibrating with missed calls from the office. For the first time in his career, he silenced it without checking the messages. Something more important demanded his attention. The unfamiliar territory of fatherhood, 15 years delayed. The next day, Maxwell's chauffeur brought a sleek black Bentley to Eliza's modest brownstone. As the triplets piled in, eyes wide with wonder at the leather seats and built-in screens, Maxwell noticed Eliza hesitating on the doorstep. You should come too, he said, surprising himself with the invitation. I have work to catch up on, she replied, but Maxwell could see uncertainty in her eyes. The boys would feel more comfortable with you there, he pressed, using the children as an excuse for what he wasn't ready to admit, that he wanted her there too. The ride to Maxwell's penthouse was filled with excited chatter as the boys bombarded him with questions. Do you have a helicopter? Is your house like Tony Stark's? Can we order pizza? When the elevator opened directly into his penthouse, revealing floor-to-ceiling windows with panoramic views of Manhattan, all three boys gasped in unison. Whoa! Ethan exclaimed, running toward the windows. We can see the whole world. It's just Manhattan, Lucas corrected, though his eyes were equally wide. Noah remained close to Eliza, taking in the minimalist design and expensive art with a thoughtful expression beyond his years. Maxwell watched their reactions, suddenly seeing his home through new eyes. The space that magazines had featured as the epitome of bachelor luxury now seemed sterile and impersonal. No toys, no photos, nothing that suggested a life beyond work. The pool is this way, he said, leading them through glass doors to the terrace where an infinity pool overlooked the city. Within minutes, the boys were splashing in the water, their laughter echoing off the glass and steel surroundings. Maxwell, seated awkwardly beside Eliza on a lounger, felt something unfamiliar stirring within him. "They're amazing," he said quietly. "They are," Eliza agreed, her defenses softening slightly. "You've missed so much, Maxwell." He turned to face her. "Tell me everything." As the boys played, Eliza shared stories of first steps, first words, kindergarten, achievements, and sibling rivalries. Maxwell listened with growing regret for all he'd missed, but also with something new: determination. "I want to be part of their lives going forward," he stated firmly. "And what happens when the novelty wears off?" Eliza challenged. "When a business emergency takes priority." Maxwell had no answer, because he'd never put anything above business before. But watching his sons, his flesh and blood, creating memories without him made the empire he'd built seem suddenly hollow. "I don't know how to do this," he admitted, the closest he'd come to acknowledging vulnerability in 15 years. "Nobody does at first," Eliza replied, her expression softening. "You just show up, day after day." As afternoon faded to evening, Maxwell realized no urgent emails had been checked, no calls returned, and for the first time in his adult life, he didn't care. Over the next several weeks, Maxwell methodically carved space for fatherhood in his previously all-consuming business life. He startled his executive team by blocking off every Wednesday afternoon and Saturday morning as non-negotiable personal time, words never before uttered by Maxwell Sterling. His expansive penthouse began to transform. The minimalist guest room became a colorful boys' bedroom with 3 beds. Custom-made storage units appeared, filled with toys, books, and sports equipment. His alarmed housekeeper discovered fingerprints on the once immaculate glass tables and muddy footprints on Italian marble floors. "Noah shows remarkable artistic talent," Maxwell told his bewildered COO during a budget meeting. "I've enrolled him in private lessons at the Metropolitan." The triplets settled into a routine of spending alternating weekends and Wednesday afternoons at Dad's house, a term that still sent a jolt through Maxwell each time he heard it. He learned to distinguish each boy despite their identical appearances: Noah's thoughtful observations, Lucas's methodical problem-solving, and Ethan's boundless physical energy. Eliza remained cautiously on the periphery, dropping the boys off, but rarely staying. On one Wednesday afternoon, however, a thunderstorm trapped her at the penthouse. "They've never asked about me before," Maxwell said as they watched the boys build an elaborate fort from his expensive Egyptian cotton sheets. "What changed?" Eliza sighed, cradling her tea. "Your company donated to their school's science program last year. Lucas saw your photo in the newsletter and recognized himself in your face." Maxwell felt a strange mixture of guilt and relief. "I wish I'd known." "Would it have mattered?" Eliza asked, not unkindly. "Back then?" Before he could answer, Lucas approached with a blueprint drawn on the back of a financial report. "Dad, we need more structural support for the fort. These pillows keep collapsing." "I'll see what I can do," Maxwell replied, surprising himself with how naturally the words came. Later, after the boys had demolished the fort in a pillow fight that would have horrified Maxwell's usual social circle, he found himself standing in front of a door at the end of the hallway, a room he hadn't opened in years. "What's in there?" Noah asked, appearing beside him with uncanny stealth. "Nothing," Maxwell answered too quickly. "Just storage." Noah studied him with perceptive eyes. "You look sad when you look at that door." Maxwell felt exposed by this child's simple observation. The room contained the remnants of his own childhood, painful memories he'd locked away along with the antiques his mother had left him. "Some rooms are better left closed," he said finally, guiding Noah back toward his brothers. That night, after Eliza and the boys had left, Maxwell sat alone in his silent penthouse, which now seemed emptier than ever before. With sudden resolution, he made a phone call. "Janet, cancel my Tokyo trip next week," he instructed his assistant, "and find out when second-grade career day is at Westside Elementary." Westside Elementary buzzed with excitement on career day, Children proudly led parents in business attire, medical scrubs, and work uniforms through colorful hallways. In Ms. Peterson's second-grade classroom, the triplets fidgeted nervously as they waited for Maxwell to arrive. "He's coming, right?" Lucas whispered to Eliza, who nodded reassuringly despite her own doubts. When Maxwell Sterling strode into the classroom, 15 minutes early and carrying a briefcase, the triplets' faces lit up simultaneously. "Dad's here," Ethan announced, loudly, causing several parents to turn with curious expressions. Maxwell approached Eliza, standing slightly apart from the other parents. "Sorry I'm early. Board meeting ended sooner than expected." "You canceled your Tokyo trip," she observed, having heard the excited announcement from the boys days earlier. "Some things are more important," Maxwell replied simply. When it was his turn to present, Maxwell surprised everyone, especially Eliza, by ignoring his prepared notes about finance and business strategy. Instead, he engaged the children with stories about building something from nothing, about persistence and vision. "The most important investments," he concluded, looking directly at his sons, "are not in stocks or properties, but in people and relationships." Later that evening, Maxwell invited Eliza to join them for dinner at his penthouse, a first. As the boys showed off their improvements to their bedroom, Maxwell led Eliza to his rarely used kitchen where a professional chef was preparing dinner. "You've changed," Eliza observed, watching him pour wine with uncharacteristic nervousness. "Have I?" Maxwell asked, genuinely curious. The Maxwell I knew would never have canceled an international business trip for a school event. The Maxwell you knew didn't know what he was missing, he admitted. During dinner, Lucas excitedly described a science project he was working on. "It's about structural engineering, Dad. Like what you do with buildings, but with popsicle sticks." "I'd like to help you with that," Maxwell offered, surprising himself with how much he meant it. After the boys went to bed, Maxwell and Eliza found themselves alone on the terrace, the city lights creating a private universe around them. "Thank you," Maxwell said quietly, "for raising such extraordinary boys." "They're easy to love," Eliza replied, then added softly, "They have your analytical mind. And your stubbornness." Maxwell smiled. "And your creativity, your compassion." Their eyes met briefly before both looked away. The history between them too complicated for this fragile new connection, but something had shifted. A door opening between past and future. As Maxwell walked Eliza and the sleeping boys to his driver later that night, he realized with startling clarity that for the first time in 15 years, he felt something beyond ambition. He felt possibility. A harsh November rainstorm lashed against the windows of Maxwell's penthouse as he paced anxiously across the living room. His phone buzzed repeatedly with business calls he continued to ignore. For the first time in his career, Sterling Enterprises was not his primary concern. "His fever's still 103, Eliza reported, emerging from the bedroom where Ethan lay sick. The boy had collapsed during a weekend visit, his normally boundless energy replaced by alarming lethargy. "The doctor should have been here by now," Maxwell said, checking his watch for the dozenth time. He'd called his personal physician, the best in Manhattan, demanding an immediate house call. "Most children get by with regular pediatricians," Eliza said with a weak smile, her exhaustion evident. "Not my son," Maxwell replied firmly, surprising them both with the possessive conviction in his voice. When the doorbell finally rang, Maxwell nearly sprinted to answer it. Dr. Patel entered, bringing the confident competence of a physician who normally treated CEOs and celebrities, not 7-year-old boys with mysterious fevers. "Let's have a look at our patient," the doctor said kindly, following Maxwell to the bedroom. Ethan lay small and vulnerable in the oversized bed, his usually animated face flushed with fever. Noah and Lucas sat cross-legged on the floor nearby, unusually quiet with concern for their brother. "Hey, sport," Dr. Patel said gently, sitting beside Ethan. "I hear you're not feeling well." As the examination progressed, Maxwell hovered anxiously nearby, his customary control slipping away with each of the doctor's frowns. When Dr. Patel suggested hospitalization, just to be safe, Maxwell felt a fear unlike anything he'd experienced in business. "Prepare my car," he ordered his driver over the phone. "We're going to Mount Sinai." In the hospital waiting room, Maxwell sat rigidly beside Eliza, both watching the clock as minutes stretched endlessly. Noah and Lucas had fallen asleep against their mother, but Maxwell couldn't rest. Every worst-case scenario played through his mind. A businessman accustomed to preparing for all contingencies now facing the one he had never considered, losing a child he'd only just found. "He'll be okay," Eliza whispered, reaching for Maxwell's hand. He grasped it tightly, the small connection anchoring him amid rising panic. "This is my fault," Maxwell said hoarsely. "If I'd known about them from the beginning, maybe I would have noticed symptoms sooner or—" "Stop," Eliza interrupted. "You can't rewrite the past. You're here now. That's what matters." When the doctor finally appeared with news of severe pneumonia, but a positive prognosis, Maxwell felt his knees weaken with relief. Visiting Ethan in his hospital room, seeing tubes and monitors attached to his small body, Maxwell made a silent vow that would have shocked his business associates. Nothing, no deal, no meeting, no amount of money would ever take priority over these boys again. That night, as Eliza dozed in a chair beside Ethan's bed, Maxwell stepped into the corridor to make a call. "Janet," he said to his assistant, "clear my schedule for the next week, and start the paperwork for parental leave benefits for all Sterling employees, effective immediately." The hospital's fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across the waiting room as Ethan slept peacefully in his room. Finally, on the road to recovery, Maxwell sat beside Eliza, both exhausted from 3 days of anxious vigil. "You didn't have to stay," Eliza said softly, breaking the silence. "Your company can survive without me for a few days," Maxwell finished. He ran a hand through his disheveled hair, his usual immaculate appearance long abandoned. "Nearly losing Ethan made me realize I've been losing things my entire life without acknowledging it." Eliza studied him curiously. "What do you mean?" Maxwell stared at his hands, the manicured nails of a man who rarely did physical work. "That locked room in my penthouse," he began hesitantly. "It contains my mother's things. She died when I was 12. Cancer." "I didn't know," Eliza whispered. "You never talked about your family when we were together." "Because it hurt too much," Maxwell admitted. "My father, he couldn't cope after she died, started drinking. By the time I was 15, he'd gambled away our home, our savings. One day he just didn't come back." Understanding dawned in Eliza's eyes. "So you built your empire to ensure you'd never be vulnerable again?" Maxwell nodded, the truth of her words striking deep. "When we married, I was still climbing. Every deal, every acquisition was security. I thought I was building our future, but I was really just running from my past. And I couldn't wait," Eliza acknowledged, her own confession emerging. "I was 24, watching my husband work 18-hour days. I wanted a partner, not a provider." "You deserved both," Maxwell said quietly. "When I discovered I was pregnant," Eliza continued, "it was weeks after our divorce. I was terrified. 3 babies, no husband." She twisted her hands together. "I told myself you wouldn't want them, that your ambition left no room for children." "You weren't wrong," Maxwell admitted painfully. "Back then I probably would have seen them as complications, not blessings." The honesty hung between them, both uncomfortable and cathartic. "I've missed 7 years," Maxwell said finally. 7 birthdays, first steps, first words. "I can't get those back." "No," Eliza agreed gently, "but you haven't missed everything. There are still first bike rides without training wheels, first home runs, middle school, high school, college." Maxwell looked toward Ethan's room, where Noah and Lucas had fallen asleep in chairs beside their brother's bed. "I want to be there, for all of it," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Not just weekends and Wednesdays." Eliza's hand found his in the dim light. Not quite forgiveness, not quite reconciliation, but something new. A bridge between their broken past and a possible future. One step at a time, she said softly. The transformation of Maxwell Sterling's life continued as winter settled over Manhattan. Most striking was the change to his penthouse, once a showplace of minimalist luxury, now bearing cheerful evidence of children at every turn. Colorful artwork adorned refrigerator doors, school backpacks cluttered the entryway, and 3 distinct study areas had been set up in what was once a formal dining room. Maxwell had purchased a brownstone just 4 blocks from Eliza's apartment, significantly closer than his downtown penthouse. Though he maintained both residences, the brownstone increasingly felt like home, especially on the weekends when all 3 boys stayed overnight. "Dad, can you check my math homework?" Lucas called from the kitchen table one Thursday evening. The word "Dad" still created a warm sensation in Maxwell's chest each time he heard it. "In a moment," Maxwell replied, finishing a bedtime story for Ethan, who had finally returned to school after his illness. Noah sat nearby, sketching the scene with remarkable skill for a 7-year-old. Eliza arrived to pick up the boys, pausing in the doorway to observe the domestic tableau. The sight of Maxwell Sterling, feared business titan, patiently explaining fractions to Lucas while simultaneously admiring Noah's artwork, would have shocked the business world. "They can stay for dinner," Maxwell offered, looking up at Eliza. "I had Mrs. Collins prepare that pasta they like." "You've become quite the hands-on father," Eliza remarked, setting down her purse in what had become a familiar gesture. More and more she found herself staying for these impromptu family dinners. Later, after the boys were absorbed in a board game, Maxwell and Eliza sat in the kitchen, sharing a bottle of wine. "The board is pressuring me to resume international travel," Maxwell confessed. "Singapore next month. I can't put it off forever." "You don't need my permission," Eliza said, though her expression betrayed concern. "I want the boys to stay with me while you're at that teachers' conference the same week," Maxwell continued. "Mrs. Collins can help, but I'd like to hire a proper nanny for when I'm working late." Eliza studied him carefully. "You're really serious about this, aren't you, being a full-time father?" "I've never been more serious about anything," Maxwell replied, the certainty in his voice unmistakable. As they cleaned up dinner dishes together, another new experience for Maxwell, their hands occasionally brushed, creating moments of awareness that neither was ready to acknowledge. The boundary between co-parenting and something more was becoming increasingly blurred. What had begun as an arrangement born of obligation was evolving into something neither had anticipated: a family. Snow fell gently outside the windows of Sterling Enterprise's top-floor boardroom as Maxwell faced the stern expressions of his executive team. The quarterly presentation displayed on the wall behind him showed troubling numbers. Market share had slipped 3%, and 2 major clients had moved to competitors. "The Singapore deal is critical, Max," said Victoria Chen, his CFO and longest-serving executive. "Our Asian expansion can't proceed without your personal involvement." Maxwell nodded, studying the concerned faces around the mahogany table. These were people who had followed him for years, trusted his leadership implicitly. Now they were witnessing something unprecedented: Maxwell Sterling putting personal matters ahead of business. "I understand the stakes," he replied, straightening his tie, a habit from his fully devoted corporate days. "I've arranged to be in Singapore for 3 days instead of the planned 2 weeks. The boys will join me for the remaining time, an educational spring break." Whispers circulated around the table. Richard Keller, head of acquisitions, cleared his throat. "With all due respect, Maxwell, this isn't a family vacation. Billions are at stake. The Zhao Group won't appreciate negotiating between your childcare arrangements." Maxwell's expression hardened. 6 months ago, he would have fired someone for that comment, but fatherhood had taught him patience. "The Zhao Group will appreciate that I value family as much as business," Maxwell replied evenly. "It's a perspective they respect in their own culture." The meeting continued, but Maxwell felt the undercurrent of doubt. His team was questioning whether he still had the killer instinct that had built Sterling Enterprises into a global powerhouse. Meanwhile, across town, Eliza faced her own professional challenges in the principal's office at Westside Elementary. The position in Chicago is a significant advancement, Ms. Carter, Principal Winters explained. District Curriculum Coordinator for one of the largest school systems in the country. It's quite an honor to be recruited. Eliza nodded, conflicted. It's an amazing opportunity, she acknowledged. But the boys are settled here, their father is here. Ah, yes, Maxwell Sterling, Principal Winters said with a knowing look. The staff has certainly noticed his increased involvement. Eliza bristled at the implication. He's their father. He has every right to be involved. Of course, the principal backpedaled. It's just unusual. The sudden appearance of a billionaire father, the dramatic change in the boy's circumstances. Some parents have expressed concern about the disruption. Eliza stood abruptly. My children's welfare is not up for discussion by the PTA gossip circle. Maxwell is an excellent father who is trying to make up for lost time. Later that evening, when Eliza mentioned the Chicago offer during dinner at Maxwell's brownstone, she watched his face carefully. Chicago? Maxwell repeated, setting down his fork. The triplets, engaged in their own conversation about a school project, didn't notice the sudden tension. That's quite an opportunity. It is, Eliza agreed, noting his carefully neutral tone. The salary would be nearly double what I make now. Money isn't an issue, Maxwell said automatically, then grimaced at how it sounded. I mean, I know. What you mean? Eliza interrupted gently. But this isn't about money, it's about my career. Maxwell glanced at the boys, lowering his voice. And what about them? What about us? The word hung between them. Us. Undefined yet weighted with possibility. Before Eliza could respond, Maxwell's phone buzzed with the custom tone reserved for emergencies. He excused himself reluctantly. I need to take this, he apologized. Stepping into his study, Victoria's voice was tense on the line. The Zhao group is pulling out. They say they need more personal assurance from you. They want you in Singapore next week, not next month. Maxwell closed his eyes. The collision of his worlds now unavoidable. Through the open door, he could see Eliza helping the boys clear the dinner dishes, the four of them laughing together. The family he'd only just discovered. The family that might move to Chicago. Max, are you there? This could tank the Asian expansion, Victoria pressed. In his previous life, the decision would have been automatic. Business first, always. But now, watching his sons, these miracle children who carried his features, his mannerisms, his blood, Maxwell felt the weight of a different kind of responsibility. Tell Zhao I'll video conference tomorrow, Maxwell decided. And book me on a flight next Monday, after the boys' science fair, 3 days only. Victoria's exasperated sigh conveyed volumes. This isn't like you, Max. No, Maxwell agreed, watching Ethan demonstrate a karate kick in the kitchen while Eliza applauded. It's like someone better. Maxwell stood at the window of his Singapore hotel suite, the city's breathtaking skyline blurring as his mind remained fixed on the family he'd left behind in New York. The Zhao negotiations had been successful, surprisingly so. His newfound perspective on work-life balance had actually impressed the family-oriented Asian executives more than his previous relentless approach. Mr. Sterling, your video call with New York is ready, his assistant announced. Maxwell nodded, moving to his laptop where 3 identical faces soon appeared on screen, crowding together to fit in the frame. Dad! They shouted in unison, their excitement palpable even across the world. How's Singapore? Lucas asked immediately. Did you see any Komodo dragons? Ethan interjected. Those are in Indonesia, Noah corrected, always the detail-oriented. 1. Maxwell found himself smiling, a genuine, unrestrained smile that would have shocked his business associates. Singapore is beautiful, but I miss you boys. 2 more days, then I'll be home. Mom got another call about Chicago, Lucas announced, causing Maxwell's smile to falter. Eliza appeared in the frame, gently moving the boys aside. That was supposed to be private, Lucas, she chided softly. Sorry, Maxwell said. Can we talk later? Just us? After chatting with the boys about their school day and promising to bring home authentic Singapore souvenirs, Maxwell found himself alone with Eliza on the video call. "They've offered me the position," she said without preamble. "They need an answer by next week." Maxwell felt a tightness in his chest that had nothing to do with business anxiety. "And what are you thinking?" he asked carefully. Eliza hesitated. "It's complicated. Professionally, it's everything I've worked toward. But the boys are thriving, with you in their lives. I never expected that bringing you into the picture would create this dilemma. I could open a Chicago office," Maxwell suggested impulsively. Eliza's surprised laugh warmed him even across thousands of miles. "You'd relocate a billion-dollar company for us?" "Not the entire company," Maxwell clarified, though the fact that he'd even considered it revealed how profoundly his priorities had shifted. "But yes, I'd open a Chicago division if that's what it takes." The silence that followed held more meaning than either was ready to articulate. "Why?" Eliza finally asked, the simple question cutting to the heart of everything. Maxwell took a deep breath. "Because 7 months ago I had everything money could buy and nothing that truly mattered. Now I have 3 boys who call me Dad, and you—" He paused, gathering courage. "And I'm not willing to lose any of you again." Eliza's eyes glistened. "Maxwell, don't decide about Chicago yet," he requested. "Please, wait until I'm home." After ending the call, Maxwell canceled his remaining meetings for the evening and stood at the window again, watching Singapore's lights illuminate the darkness. For the first time in his methodically planned life, Maxwell Sterling was following, his heart into uncharted territory, and it felt right. Maxwell's jet touched down at JFK nearly 5 hours behind schedule. Spring storms had delayed flights across the eastern seaboard, leaving him anxious and irritable, emotions the old Maxwell would have directed at subordinates, but which the new Maxwell channeled into concern for his family. "Can't this move any faster?" he asked his driver as they crawled through Manhattan traffic. When they finally reached Eliza's apartment building, Maxwell bounded up the stairs rather than waiting for the elevator. He knocked, heart pounding with anticipation after a week away. The door opened to reveal not Eliza but her sister Jennifer, whose expression instantly put Maxwell on alert. "Where are they?" he asked, scanning the apartment. "Mount Sinai, Jennifer," replied gravely. "Lucas collapsed at school this morning. High fever, same symptoms Ethan had. Eliza's been trying to reach you, but with the storms—" Maxwell was already heading back to the stairs, phone pressed to his ear. "Take me to Mount Sinai," he barked at his driver. At the hospital, Maxwell found Eliza in the pediatric wing, Noah and Ethan sitting quietly beside her. Her eyes were red-rimmed from crying. "Maxwell," she breathed, relief evident in her voice. "How is he?" Maxwell asked, embracing the twins who ran to him. "They're running tests," Eliza explained. "They think it might be rheumatic fever, a complication from strep throat he had last month. The doctor says it's treatable, but—" Her voice broke. Maxwell pulled her into an embrace, propriety forgotten in their shared concern. "He'll be all right," he promised, though he had no authority to make such guarantees. Hours later, the diagnosis was confirmed. Lucas would recover, with proper treatment, but required careful monitoring and follow-up care for the next year to prevent heart complications. "Chicago is impossible now," Eliza said quietly as they stood outside Lucas's room while a nurse checked his vitals. "He needs his regular doctors, familiar surroundings." Maxwell squeezed her hand. "I'm sorry about your opportunity." "It's not your fault," Eliza replied. "It's just parenthood. Plans change. Priorities shift." "I've been thinking," Maxwell said cautiously, "about our situation, about the future." Before he could continue, his phone buzzed. The display showed Victoria Chen's name for the 3rd time that hour. "Take it," Eliza encouraged. "The Singapore deal." Maxwell silenced the phone. "It can wait. This can't." Inside Lucas's room, the boy smiled weakly when his father approached. "Dad, you're back?" "I'm back," Maxwell confirmed, sitting beside the bed and taking his son's small hand. "And I'm not going anywhere." Outside, Victoria stared at her unanswered call and made a decision. The board needed to know. Maxwell Sterling, their ruthless leader, had fundamentally changed, and not everyone would welcome that transformation. The Sterling Enterprises boardroom hummed with tension as Maxwell faced his executive team. 2 weeks had passed since his return from Singapore, and the whispers of discontent had grown into open challenges. The numbers speak for themselves. Victoria, Chen stated, gesturing to the presentation displaying quarterly results. Our stock has dropped 12%. 2 major acquisitions have stalled. Clients are questioning your commitment. Maxwell surveyed the faces around the table, people who had been loyal soldiers in his corporate army for years. Now they looked at him with barely concealed doubt. I understand your concerns, Maxwell began, his voice steady. For 15 years, I've dedicated every waking moment to building this company. I've demanded the same commitment from all of you. Work came first, always. Richard Keller, emboldened by the charged atmosphere, spoke up. And that approach built a multi-billion-dollar empire. Now suddenly you're canceling meetings for Little League games and rushing home for family dinners. Instead of the defensive response they expected, Maxwell smiled. Yes, I am. He stood, buttoning his suit jacket with the same precision he applied to business deals. When I started this company, it was to create security, to build something unshakable. I succeeded beyond my wildest expectations. Maxwell walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan. But I realized something recently. I built an empire without understanding why I was building it. Success without purpose is just numbers on a balance sheet. He turned back to face them. I'm not stepping back from Sterling Enterprises. I'm bringing a new perspective to it, one that recognizes life outside these walls has value too. Victoria leaned forward. Maxwell, the board is considering a vote of no confidence. They're questioning whether you can lead effectively with these divided priorities. Instead of anger, Maxwell felt an unexpected calm. 7 months ago, this threat would have consumed him. Now, it seemed almost inconsequential compared to what truly mattered. I've prepared for that possibility, he replied, returning to his seat, which is why I've drafted a new corporate structure. He distributed folders to each executive. Sterling Enterprises will reorganize into 5 divisions, each with its own president reporting to me as CEO. Victoria, you'll head international operations. Richard, acquisitions and development. As they flipped through the detailed plans, expressions shifted from skepticism to interest. Maxwell had always been strategic, but this level of organizational foresight was impressive. This isn't retreat, Maxwell continued. It's evolution. Our clients don't need me personally overseeing every detail. They need a strong, capable team with clear authority. The structure gives you all more autonomy while allowing me to focus on big-picture strategy. By the time the meeting concluded 3 hours later, the mood had transformed. The executives filed out with new assignments and renewed confidence. Only Victoria lingered behind. You've thought of everything, she admitted. As usual. Not everything, Maxwell replied honestly. I'm still figuring out how to balance it all, but I'm determined to try. Victoria studied him with newfound respect. The boys have changed you. They have, Maxwell acknowledged. And Eliza, too. The ex-wife, Victoria mused. That's a plot twist I didn't see coming. Maxwell smiled. Neither did I. That evening, Maxwell arrived at Eliza's apartment with 3 gift bags and an unmistakable nervousness. Lucas had been discharged from the hospital 2 days earlier and was recovering well, though still confined to bed rest. What's all this? Eliza asked, as Maxwell set down the bags. Something for each of them, he explained, and something to discuss with you. The boys excitedly opened their gifts, specialized art supplies for Noah, an advanced robotics kit for Lucas, and sports equipment for Ethan. While they were absorbed with their presents, Maxwell led Eliza to the kitchen. I had a board meeting today, he began. They're concerned about my changing priorities. Are you about to lose your company? Eliza asked, worry crossing her features. No, Maxwell assured her. I reorganized, Created a structure that gives me more personal time without sacrificing business needs. Relief flooded Eliza's face. That's wonderful. There's more, Maxwell continued, uncharacteristically hesitant. I've been thinking about our situation. The boys going back and forth between homes. Your career opportunities being limited by geography. Eliza's expression was guarded. What are you suggesting? Maxwell took a deep breath. I bought a house. In Westchester County near the boys' school. 6 bedrooms, large yard, excellent school district. Close enough to the city for my work, but away from the chaos. Room for everyone to have their space. Maxwell, Eliza began carefully. Are you asking us to move in with you? I'm asking for more than that, he replied, reaching into his pocket and withdrawing a small velvet box. I'm asking for a second chance. For all of us. Eliza stared at the unopened box, emotions warring across her face. This is happening so fast, is it? Maxwell challenged gently. Or has it been 15 years in the making? Before Eliza could respond, they heard shuffling at the doorway. 3 identical faces peered around the corner, eyes wide with anticipation. Are you asking Mom to marry you? Lucas asked bluntly, despite his still weakened condition. Because we vote yes, Ethan added enthusiastically. Noah, ever the observer, simply watched his mother's face. Maxwell knelt to the boy's level. I was trying to do this properly, but since you're already here, yes, I'm asking your mother to marry me, to make our family official. The boys erupted in cheers, rushing forward to surround their parents. In the joyful chaos, Maxwell looked up to find Eliza's eyes filled with tears. You haven't answered, he reminded her softly. Eliza touched his face gently. You broke my heart once. I know, Maxwell acknowledged. I was a different man then. Ambitious but empty. And now? Maxwell gestured to the boys who watched with bated breath. Now I understand what truly matters. These boys, you, the family we could be together. In the small kitchen of the apartment, where Eliza had raised their sons alone for 7 years, surrounded by the children neither had planned but who had transformed both their lives, Eliza finally nodded. Yes, she whispered, then more firmly, yes. As cheers erupted again, Maxwell slipped the ring onto her finger. Not the ostentatious diamond he might have chosen in his previous life, but an elegant emerald that matched her eyes. A new beginning, not a possession. That night, as the expanded family celebrated with impromptu pizza and ice cream, Maxwell Sterling, feared business titan and newly devoted father, realized he had finally found the success that mattered most. The sprawling Westchester estate bloomed with spring flowers as workers bustled about, preparing for the afternoon celebration. 6 weeks had passed since Maxwell's proposal, and today would mark both their wedding and the family's official move into their new home. Maxwell stood in what would be his home office, adjusting his tie while surveying the property through floor-to-ceiling windows. The contrast to his Manhattan penthouse couldn't have been starker. 5 acres of landscaped gardens, a pool area designed with children in mind, basketball court, and even a treehouse commissioned from a renowned architect as a surprise for the boys. Having second thoughts, came a voice from the doorway. Victoria Chen stood there, elegant in a formal dress, her expression curious. Not one, Maxwell replied with certainty that surprised even himself. How's the transition going at the office? Smoother than expected, Victoria admitted. Your new organizational chart was inspired. The board is cautiously optimistic. Maxwell smiled. And the Zhao Group? Impressed by your family values. They've increased their investment by 15%. Victoria shook her head in wonder. Who would have thought that Maxwell Sterling becoming a family man would actually improve business? Life is full of surprises, Maxwell agreed, thinking of the 3 identical boys who had upended his carefully ordered existence in the best possible way. As Victoria excused herself to join the gathering guests, Maxwell felt a presence at his side. Noah, impeccable in his junior groomsman suit, studied the grounds alongside his father. Mom's nervous, he reported solemnly. Maxwell glanced down at his observant son. Good nervous or bad nervous? Noah considered this with the seriousness only a 7-year-old could muster. Good nervous, like Christmas Eve. Maxwell smiled, placing a gentle hand on Noah's shoulder. That's exactly how I feel too. In the master. Sweet. Eliza sat at the vanity as her sister Jennifer arranged her hair. The elegant cream dress she'd chosen was simple but stunning, much like the intimate garden ceremony they'd planned. I still can't believe this is happening, Jennifer remarked, securing another pin. Maxwell Sterling, the Maxwell Sterling, becoming my brother-in-law. The same man you used to call emotionally unavailable and pathologically ambitious. Eliza met her sister's eyes in the mirror. People change, Jen. Sometimes they just need the right reason. 3 reasons in your case, Jennifer replied with a smile. The boys are over the moon about this. A knock at the door revealed Lucas and Ethan, both fidgeting in their suits, but beaming with excitement. Dad sent us to check if you're ready, Lucas announced importantly. Almost, Eliza assured them. How's everything going downstairs? There are so many people, Ethan exclaimed. Dad's business friends are all fancy, but they're being nice to us. Eliza smiled at their enthusiasm. The guest list had been a careful blend of Maxwell's high-powered business associates and Eliza's more modest circle of friends and colleagues. She'd worried about the worlds colliding, but Maxwell had insisted on an inclusive celebration. Dad looks happy, Lucas observed. Not business happy, but real happy. Eliza's heart swelled at this simple but profound observation. I'm real happy too, she told her sons. As the ceremony time approached, Maxwell stood beneath a flower-covered pergola in the garden, watching as guests settled into their seats. The gathering was smaller than his business associates had expected, just 60 people rather than the society event they'd anticipated from one of New York's wealthiest bachelors. Soft music began, and Maxwell's breath caught as the triplets appeared at the garden path, walking in perfect unison as they'd practiced for weeks. Each carried a small box containing a symbol of their new family. Noah with the marriage rings, Lucas with a family medallion they'd designed together, and Ethan with the keys to their new home. When Eliza appeared on her father's arm, Maxwell felt an emotion he couldn't have articulated mere months ago, a sense of completeness, of pieces falling into place. Her smile, directed solely at him, spoke of shared history, forgiveness, and new beginnings. Dearly beloved, the officiant began as Eliza reached Maxwell's side. We are gathered here today not just to unite 2 people in marriage, but to celebrate the official beginning of a family that fate has already brought together. As they exchanged vows, Maxwell added an unplanned element, kneeling down to address the boys directly. Noah, Lucas, Ethan, he said, his voice steady despite the emotion behind it. I make these promises to you as well, to be not just your father by birth, but by choice and action every day, to love, guide, and support you as you grow, to honor the amazing start your mother gave you, and to partner with her in helping you become the extraordinary men I know you'll be. There wasn't a dry eye in the garden as the boys launched themselves into a group hug, momentarily disrupting the ceremony's solemnity, but perfectly capturing its essence. Later, as the reception flowed from afternoon into evening, Maxwell found himself approached by Richard Keller, who'd been among the most skeptical of his board members. I owe you an apology, Richard admitted, gesturing toward the dance floor where Eliza twirled with each boy in turn. I thought you were having some sort of midlife crisis, but seeing you today, this is real. Maxwell nodded. The most real thing in my life. Your father would be proud, Richard added, referencing the man whom Maxwell rarely discussed. Not just of the business you built, but of the family you've created. The comment struck Maxwell deeply. Thank you, Richard. As night fell, and lanterns illuminated the garden, Maxwell found a quiet moment with Eliza on the terrace watching their sons, now changed from formal suits into comfortable clothes, playing an elaborate game of tag with other children. No regrets? Maxwell asked, his arm around her waist. Eliza leaned into him. About marrying you again, not one. About Chicago? Your career? She turned to face him fully. The school district called yesterday. They're creating a curriculum development. Position, part-time, flexible hours. Perfect for a mother of 3 active boys. Maxwell raised an eyebrow. You're doing? Not at all, Eliza insisted. Though I suspect a certain donation to their STEM program might have created some goodwill. Maxwell laughed. Guilty as charged. Consider it an investment in exceptional hunting. As the celebration continued around them, Maxwell reflected on the astonishing journey of the past 8 months, from solitary business titan to husband and father, from a man defined solely by his achievements to one who understood that his greatest legacy would be the 3 identical boys now racing across what had become, in every sense that mattered, their family home. The integration of their worlds, Maxwell's wealth and business acumen with Eliza's warmth and emotional intelligence, had created something neither could have built alone. A true family, forged not just by blood and marriage, but by choice, forgiveness, and love. 1 year later, the Sterling estate gleamed in summer sunshine as guests gathered for the triplets' 8th birthday celebration. The transformation of the property was complete. What had once been an elegant but formal showplace had become a true family home. The immaculate gardens now featured a baseball diamond. The Olympic-sized pool had been outfitted with water slides, and colorful artwork adorned walls, previously reserved for valuable paintings. Maxwell stood on the terrace, surveying the controlled chaos with quiet satisfaction. 3 identical birthday cakes waited on the outdoor dining table, each reflecting the distinct personalities that had emerged even more clearly over the past year. A science-themed design for Lucas, an art-inspired creation for Noah, and a sports extravaganza for Ethan. Despite their identical DNA, the boys had grown increasingly individualized under the nurturing guidance of both parents. Quite a change from the corporate galas you used to host, observed Eleanor, Maxwell's longtime housekeeper, who had adapted remarkably well to the transition from serving a solitary businessman to caring for a lively family. For the better, Maxwell replied without hesitation. His gaze followed Eliza as she moved among the guests, laughing with other parents from the boys' school, people who had once been intimidated by her connection to Maxwell Sterling, but now saw them simply as Noah, Lucas, and Ethan's parents. Her new role as curriculum developer had flourished, allowing her to impact children's education while maintaining the flexibility her family needed. "Dad! Dad!" Lucas called, running toward him with excitement. "Grandpa's here!" Maxwell turned to see Robert Carter, Eliza's father, making his way across the lawn. The elderly man had been cautious about his daughter's reconciliation with her ex-husband, but observing Maxwell's genuine commitment to the family had gradually thawed his reservations. "Robert," Maxwell greeted him warmly, "the boys have been counting the days until your arrival. Wouldn't miss it," Robert replied, his weathered hand clasping Maxwell's in a firm handshake that acknowledged their evolving relationship, though I'm still getting used to this place. Quite different from the apartment. "It's just a house," Maxwell said with newfound humility. "The family inside makes it a home." As Robert was led away by an eager Lucas to see his latest science project, Maxwell caught sight of Victoria Chen arriving with her husband, now welcome as friends rather than just business associates. "The great Maxwell Sterling, master of the birthday party," Victoria teased, surveying the elaborate celebration. "The board would never believe it." "They've adjusted," Maxwell replied with a smile. The reorganization of Sterling Enterprises had proved remarkably successful. Counter to all expectations, the company had thrived under the new structure, with quarterly profits exceeding projections for 3 consecutive quarters. Maxwell's more balanced approach had not diminished his business acumen, it had enhanced it with perspective that money alone couldn't buy. The sound system announced it was time for the birthday presentation, and guests gathered around the outdoor stage area. The triplets, practically vibrating with excitement, stood together at the center. "Before we begin," Maxwell announced, "Eliza and I have a special presentation for our sons." Eliza joined him, carrying a polished wooden box. "When we married, last year," she explained to the guests, We began a new chapter as an official family, but our story actually began much earlier. Maxwell opened the box to reveal 3 identical vintage pocket watches, smaller versions of the one he'd carried. For years, his own father's timepiece that had symbolized both connection and loss. "These belong to your great-grandfather," Maxwell told the boys, his voice steady despite the emotion behind it. "I had them restored for you. They represent our family's past, present, and future." As Maxwell placed a watch in each boy's hand, he continued more softly, "Time is the most precious gift we have. I lost 7 years with you, but I promise to make every minute going forward count." The boys, unusually solemn, accepted the watches with reverence, understanding instinctively the significance of the moment. Noah, ever the artist, traced the engraved initials on the back of his watch. Lucas examined the intricate mechanism. Inside, Ethan immediately looped the chain around his neck, wearing it proudly. "We have one more surprise," Eliza announced. "Boys, would you like to tell everyone your news?" The triplets exchanged excited glances before Ethan burst out, unable to contain himself. "We're going to have a baby sister." A cheer went up from the gathered friends and family as Maxwell wrapped his arm around Eliza's still flat stomach. After a year of discussion, they had decided to expand their family, wanting the boys to experience the joy of an older sibling relationship. "Due in winter," Eliza explained, glowing with happiness. "The boys are already planning to be the world's best big brothers." As the party continued with cake and presents, Maxwell found himself momentarily apart, watching the scene with a sense of wonder. 3 identical boys, his sons, surrounded by friends, secure in the knowledge they were loved, no longer carrying the burden of family stress or financial insecurity. Victoria approached, handing him a glass of champagne. "Penny for your thoughts?" Maxwell shook his head slightly, just reflecting on how quickly life can change. 8 years ago, I had everything money could buy and nothing that truly mattered. And now? Maxwell's gaze moved from the boys to Eliza, who was laughing with her sister. "Now I understand what true wealth is." Later that evening, after guests had departed and the boys had finally succumbed to birthday exhaustion, Maxwell and Eliza sat on the terrace enjoying the peaceful aftermath. "They loved the watches," Eliza observed, nestling against him in the cooling evening air. "I hoped they would," Maxwell replied. "I've been holding on to my father's watch for so long, letting it represent loss. It feels right to transform that symbol into something positive for our sons." Eliza placed her hand over his. "You've transformed more than just the watches, Maxwell. This family, this home, everything has been reimagined because you were brave enough to open your heart." Maxwell thought back to that autumn day when fate had led him to spot Eliza and the boys through a cafe window. How close he'd come to walking past, remaining isolated in his empire of wealth without substance. "I was afraid," he admitted quietly. "After our marriage failed, I convinced myself that business was safer than relationships, that achievements could substitute for connection." "We were both young," Eliza reminded him. "I was impatient, unwilling to weather the difficult years of building something together, whether a company or a family." Maxwell gently placed his hand on her stomach where their daughter grew. "Second chances are rare. I plan to honor this one." Inside the house, the sound of footsteps drew their attention. Lucas appeared in the doorway, still in his birthday t-shirt, but now clutching his new pocket watch. "I can't sleep," he admitted. "I keep thinking about time." Maxwell opened his arms, and Lucas climbed into his lap, something that might soon become less common as the boys grew older, making the moment all the more precious. "What about time?" Maxwell asked gently. "You said you lost 7 years with us," Lucas explained, his brow furrowed with the serious thoughts only an 8-year-old could conjure at bedtime. "But what if you never found us? What if you walked past that cafe and didn't look in the window?" The question struck Maxwell deeply. This perceptive child had identified the sliding door moment that had changed everything. "But I did look," Maxwell answered carefully. "Sometimes life gives us exactly what we need, exactly when we need it, even if we don't recognize it at first." Lucas seemed to consider this, turning the pocket watch over in his small hands that resembled Maxwell's own. "I'm glad you found us, Dad." So am I, Maxwell whispered, his voice rough with emotion. More than you can possibly know. Later, after tucking Lucas back into bed between his sleeping brothers, Maxwell returned to find Eliza had fallen asleep on the terrace lounge. He covered her gently with a throw blanket, then stood watching the moonlight illuminate the grounds of their home. In his pocket, Maxwell's father's watch ticked steadily, now joined in spirit by the 3 smaller versions he'd gifted his sons. Once a reminder of abandonment and loss, the timepiece had become part of a legacy he was actively creating, a legacy not of wealth or power, but of presence, commitment, and love. The boy he'd been, angry at his father's abandonment, determined, never to depend on anyone, could never have imagined this future. The driven young man who'd married Eliza the first time, too ambitious to prioritize their relationship, wouldn't have recognized himself in the husband and father he'd become. Yet here he stood, Maxwell Sterling, once defined solely by his financial empire, now measured by the lives he touched most intimately. 3 sons he'd nearly missed knowing, a wife who'd granted him redemption, and a daughter on the way who would know from her first breath that she was valued above all worldly success. Full days. Circle, Maxwell thought, his hand resting protectively on Eliza's shoulder. From strangers to spouses to strangers again. And now family in the truest sense. Bound not just by blood and legal documents, but by choice, forgiveness, and the daily decision to prioritize love above all else. The greatest acquisition of his life hadn't been a company or property, but this, the reclamation of his humanity, the discovery of joy and connection, and the simple, profound understanding that no achievement could substitute for loving and being loved in return.